There's the textual basis in scriptures and scripturalism of the three religions. And this is something that is quite clearly and obviously present, where all three religions have adopted this concept of scripturalism. And all three religions are religions of the book in that sense. That is, they each have different scriptures. In the case of Judaism and Christianity, of course, they have the overlapping scripture of the Hebrew scriptures or Old Testament, which is claimed by both, but not by the Muslims. The fact that the Muslims disassociate themselves from the Bible, however, is not necessarily a feature of conflict, because there's been plenty of conflict between the Jews and the Christians over the fact that they share the same scripture. Rather, the fact that the Muslims have a separate scripture means that the Muslims actually are not trying to stick their oar in, at least not very much, interpreting the Bible for the Christians and Jews. Rather, that's scripture that belongs to those religions, and the Muslims have their own scripture separately from that. There's also the difference in the scripturalism that there's always a tendency of all religions in scripturalism to accumulate scriptures. And usually when scriptures are accumulated, they are not thrown out, because if you threw them out, you would be rejecting the whole religion. And so there's a tendency not to throw out any scriptures. Having said that, there are cases actually where scriptures have been thrown out that have happened historically, occasionally. But the main scriptures usually are quite untouchable in that respect. So the Jews have the Tanakh, but they also have the secondary scripture of the Talmud. I say the Talmud is scriptural because the doctrine of Orthodox Judaism is that the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, is also divinely inspired, and that the chain of transmission given in the tractate Pirkei Avot is a guarantee of the transmission of that back to Moses and from God to Moses, where it is the oral law that was given to Moses and handed down till eventually it was written vastly later than the Bible was written. So there's sort of the doctrine of the dual Torah, and the dual Torah to some extent is represented in the Bible and the Talmud. And Christianity doesn't have that, although it has a dualism of its scripture in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And Islam has Quran and Hadith. One wouldn't want to push the fact that there is a sort of dual scriptures in each of these religions too much, because the Christian one is united in the Bible, for one thing. And the attitudes toward scripture have also varied as to the exact character of scripture, the necessity of literalism and interpretation, and what the nature of the revelation of the scripture is, and whether it's viewed as being something that came directly from God or not. There's been some variation on that question. But nevertheless, all these traditions are really scriptural. And they do, as you've seen even from my amount of quotation of the Quran, just as I've talked to you, quote scripture lots. It's very, very frequently invoked. So the scriptural basis of the religions has not to be neglected and is very central to the religions.